Hi, you're listening to Childless and Moving Onward. This is the place where we talk about thriving in life when you're a woman who is childless, not by choice, regardless of the road that brought you to childlessness. Hi, and welcome to episode 75 of Childless and Moving Onward. I'm Gail Miller, your host, speaker, life coach, and physician. And also, while being childless not by choice is part of my story, it's only one piece of the whole. I intentionally mention this last because I don't want it to define me. That doesn't mean I don't still have bad days. Doesn't mean I don't have days where the sadness surfaces, where old hurts, come back up. I've experienced all of that. This podcast exists to acknowledge those realities while also exploring how to build a full and meaningful life alongside them. My hope with each episode is that even if the pain of childlessness lingers, it doesn't have to control your journey. Here, I focus on ways to live with that pain instead of letting it lead the way. And today, I want to talk about the word choice and a different terminology that I'm going to get to. Because the term childless not by choice gets so much judgment. Even in this community of women who are involuntarily childless, just the word childless is controversial. But what I want to talk about is the word choice, because I know I'm not alone in hearing from so many others that we made a choice, and so we are not childless, not by choice. What am I talking about? And that is the criticism of someone who, with a chronic health problem, for whom pregnancy is unsafe or difficult, or being able to take care of a child isn't possible, or someone who is single and won't be a single mom, someone who carries a genetic disease, someone with a partner who doesn't want children or already has children and doesn't want more, someone who has endometriosis and had a hysterectomy or had a hysterectomy for some other reason, somebody with a history of trauma, someone who went through IVF and stopped, someone who had pregnancy loss or losses. That is in no way a complete list. There are too many reasons why someone would be childless when they don't want to be, too many to list. But the not by choice part is where people judge us because they see what we've each done as making a choice. And that highlights how society misinterprets or misunderstands the lived experience of being childless not by choice. And this came to mind not too long ago for me because of someone who was telling their story. They were not, it had nothing to do with childlessness. They weren't childless. But something they had been going through and ended up where they didn't want to be after decisions that they made, choosing between two equally bad options that were not going to lead them where they wanted. And they talked about it in terms of it's actually making the least worst decision. And wow, that hit me. Yeah, it's not a choice. And I've said this before, but listening to that choice of words, that it's making the least worst decision, really hit home. And I was like, this is what we have all gone through. And making the least worst decision is the painful process of having to choose between options, none of which are good. All of the options come with loss, risk, or heartbreak. None of them lead to the outcome you truly want, but do lead to more pain. It's not about having one good option over another. It's about navigating circumstances with limitations, health problems, relationship constraints, financial issues, repeated losses, or other factors that are outside your control. And it's about deciding which path will cause the least harm. To others, these decisions seem to be freely made choices, but they're actually acts of survival and self-preservation in painful situations. And they're acts of survival made when there simply isn't a good choice. Instead, every option carries pain and loss. So what does choice really mean here? Because others often frame our story as one of simple decisions. Simple decisions. Really? And that's because the people saying this are not the ones with this lived experience. We're told things like, you could have tried harder. You could have kept going with IVF. You could have chosen to leave your partner and have a child on your own. You didn't want kids enough. You chose your health, career, relationship, freedom, whatever it is, over motherhood. You chose the easier way, as if any of this is any easy way. I mean, seriously. And it goes on and on. It's a story based on the false idea that every path is equally open, safe, and possible. But for those of us who are childless not by choice, that isn't reality, and there aren't simple decisions. Instead, it truly is making the least worst decision. Here's the reality, though. At some point, most of us have to deal with a situation where the choices are very unfair. And I'm referring to, when I say most of us, I'm not just talking about those of us who are childless not by choice. In general, most people will eventually be in a situation where they don't have good choices. All of the options suck. We don't get a clear yes. Instead, we have a list of losses, and we have to pick the one that hurts the least. We have to pick the one that's the least damaging or is the least worst. Consider these scenarios. Is it a choice if you stop fertility treatment after heartache, heartbreak, emotional devastation, financial stress, physical devastation, or medical risk? Is it a choice if your health puts you in a position where you have to choose between potential parenthood and your survival? Is it a choice when you have a health issue that makes you decide between potential parenthood and you can survive, but you will be very ill and can't take care of a child? Is it a choice when your relationship, finances, housing, or mental health make parenting impossible? And now, in my case, for those of you who don't know my story, I had two different periods in my life when my options were, like, I'm going to say nothing but crap, frankly. When I was single in my 30s, expecting to become a mom with a partner by my side, and that didn't happen, I considered single motherhood. But I had a boss who would have fired me for being a single mom. And yes, that was a possibility at the time. And I would have lost a parent who would have considered me dead, and with it, family. Loss of job, loss of family, loss of support. Was that a choice? I mean, it sure didn't feel like it. I made the least worst decision. I met my husband eventually in my late 40s. Now, I also, when I was younger, already knew I had fertility issues. But when I met my husband, by then I thought I was over it, right? I'd convinced myself of that. But marriage brought up the reality that I was never over it. That deep, deep desire for motherhood hit me full force. But he already had 3 kids and didn't want more. And it would have meant going through IVF. So my options were stay married to a wonderful partner and not have my own child, or leave this man that I love and try to be a single mom. And with that already, by then I'd moved on with jobs, wasn't worried about my boss, but would have lost a parent and family along with it. Were those choices? Were they equal? Were they fair? It sure didn't feel like it. So again, I made the least worst decision. None of these are truly choices when they lead to pain. For anybody, for any of us. None of these are truly choices for the person having to deal with them. To others not in your shoes, it seems like simple choices, and they are anything but. So what appears as a choice from the outside is in reality making the least worst decision, navigating circumstances with no option that brings the outcome you truly want. But this is what others don't see. There are situations where choice is a luxury, meaning you don't actually have choices, where decision making is limited by factors beyond your control. Least worst decisions are acts of survival. Not by choice is about seeing the inequality between options and the ways in which society ignores the complexities. It's about refusing to let others trivialize our grief or convert our pain into blame. So when someone looks at your life and sees choice, they're missing the deep heartbreak, the sleepless nights, the research, the therapy, the inner work, and the constant negotiating with reality that is this experience. Those who are childless not by choice have often made difficult decisions that others just don't understand. And choosing the least worst option is all that's possible. Moving away from judging our journeys starts with our own changes. With us moving away from judging ourselves. Hold space for yourself and your experiences and see the difficult decisions you've made between the least worst options. They were not luxurious options. They were not true choices. they were the least worst decisions. Recognize that you are living with the painful consequences of unequal and unfair options. None good, none what you wanted, and you are doing it with courage and grace. All right, that's it for today. I'll be back with you next week. I appreciate you listening. I hope this episode was helpful to you. If you liked what you heard, schedule a free discovery call with me to see how I can help you to feel worthy and live a fulfilling life. To schedule, click on the link in the episode notes, or you can find it on my website at pathonward.com. You can also see more from me on Instagram at Childless Path Onward and Facebook and YouTube at Path Onward. Until next week, thanks again for listening.